Find any old naval charts of Antarctica, anything published before 1950. Look for a blind spot, an anomalous zone off the coast of Ellsworth Land, where the navigational markers become vague or are simply missing. My grandfather worked at the National Archives for almost 40 years. Not as a historian, no. He was on the burn team. The ones who, under the highest security clearance, destroyed documents that had expired or were never meant to see the light of day. Before he died, he gave me the only thing he ever took from his job, a thick, leather-bound notebook. He said he burned the entire case file, several boxes of it, but he couldn't bring himself to destroy this one journal. He said the world needed to know what really happened in 1946. I've translated his entries. If you find anything like this on your charts, write it in the comments. I need to know I'm not the only one who sees this. November 12th, 1946. We are aboard the icebreaker USS Polaris. This is our third month at sea. The crew is a strange mix. A dozen Marines under the command of a man named Donovan, a stern figure with empty eyes, several communications and demolitions engineers, and 3 scientists. I am Dr. Samuel Aris, a glaciologist. With me are Dr. Evelyn Reed, a physicist, and Dr. Marcus Thorne, a biologist. The official purpose of our expedition is a comprehensive survey of the Antarctic ice sheet, collecting samples, mapping the terrain. We've been supplied with the best equipment money could buy in this post-war era, but none of us scientists believe the official story. There's too much security, too much secrecy. The real reason for our journey to the southernmost continent is something found in captured German archives after the fall of Berlin. Reports, maps, encrypted radio transmissions. They haven't shown them to us, of course. Donovan only mentioned that the previous expedition, sent here by the Germans in '38, found an anomaly. Today, we reached our destination. The place looked nothing like any map I had ever seen. Instead of a relatively clear section of coast, suitable for a landing, we were met by an ice barrier that shouldn't have been there. A wall, hundreds of feet high, stretching up into the low, gray sky. And the ice here was different. Not white or blue, but almost black, with deep, dark blue veins, as if eternity itself were frozen within it. It didn't reflect light. It absorbed it. Our searchlights, aimed at the wall, left only faint, blurry smudges. Dr. Reed took preliminary readings from the deck. She said the ice barely reflects acoustic signals either. The sonar just returned meaningless noise. The signals were simply swallowed, never returning. Donovan listened to her report with a stone face. He just looked at his charts, then at the black wall, and gave the order to prepare for a landing. He said we were in the right place. November 14th, 1946. 2 days of preparation. Attempts to find a way around the barrier were fruitless. The black wall stretched for miles in both directions, a monolith. The demolition engineers set their charges. We scientists watched from the safety of the ship's deck. The explosion should have been deafening, a roar that would shake the ice fields for miles. But the sound was muffled, viscous, as if the blast occurred under deep water or thick mud. There was no shrapnel. The black ice simply buckled. A melted, dark passage formed in the wall, a tunnel leading into the mass. Its edges were smooth as if cut with a hot knife. We landed on the ice. First, Donovan and his men, then the engineers, then us. The first thing I felt stepping onto the surface was the absence of the familiar crunch under my boots. The ice was solid, yet somehow resilient, dead. There was no cracking, no echo from our footsteps. Inside the tunnel, everything changed. Outside, a piercing Antarctic wind was blowing, with temperatures around minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. But after only 20 paces into the passage, the air became still and warm, impossibly warm for this place. Maybe 32 degrees Fahrenheit, or even slightly above. The vapor from our breath disappeared. Our flashlights snatched the walls from the darkness, and I realized this wasn't just a passage blasted by explosives. This was no cave. The walls were smooth with perfect, almost polished facets that receded into the depths. We were walking down a corridor carved into black ice, 100 yards wide and at least as high. Our voices were muffled, eaten by the strange acoustics, and there was a sound, a constant, low, barely perceptible hum that was felt more by the body than by the ears. It had no source. It came from everywhere at once, from the walls, the floor, the air. Dr. Reed took out her instruments. Her Geiger counter was silent. Her magnetometer was going haywire, the needle spinning erratically. She muttered that some fundamental laws were being broken here. Dr. Thorne tried to take a scraping from the wall. His steel tool didn't leave a single scratch on the black surface. He said the material's density exceeded anything he'd ever encountered. We walked for about an hour. The corridor ran straight, without a single turn. The hum grew more distinct. Finally, we emerged into a chamber. A vast chamber, so large that the beams of our most powerful flashlights couldn't reach the ceiling or the far walls. They were simply lost in the darkness. The air here was even warmer, almost room temperature. And in the center of this chamber stood something. A huge, complex structure made of the same black material. It rose from the floor and disappeared into the darkness above. It was composed of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of interconnected polyhedrons of various sizes. Some were as large as a house, others no bigger than a fist. And the entire structure was slowly, very slowly moving. Facets shifted. Polyhedrons smoothly slid into one another, changing the overall shape of the structure. Its geometry was wrong, impossible. Looking at it, the brain refused to process perspective. Angles seemed simultaneously acute and obtuse, lines both straight and curved. The hum came from it. It was a mechanical sound. It was the sound of its very transformation. We stood in stunned silence. Even Donovan's Marines, men who had been through the war, stared with open mouths. Dr. Reed fell to her knees. She wasn't screaming. She was just staring at the structure and muttering something about phase transitions and multidimensional projections made visible in three-dimensional space. She said it was physically impossible, that this thing could not exist. Donovan seemed to be the only one who kept his composure. He looked at the object for a few minutes, then gave a short report over the radio to the ship. Object located. It is active. Then he turned to us scientists. His face was devoid of all expression. He gave an order. We were to take samples. We were to touch it. November 16th, 1946. Donovan's order hung in the still air of the chamber. No one moved. To look at the structure was one thing, but to touch it felt like sacrilege, a violation of a law of nature that hadn't even been written yet. Donovan coughed impatiently. His gaze fell on Thorne. The biologist swallowed, adjusted his glasses, and slowly walked forward. He carried a sample kit with sterile containers and a steel scraper. The closer he got to the central column, the louder the hum became, as if the structure sensed his approach. He stopped a few feet from the nearest polyhedron, which was the size of a car. Its surface was jet black, and dark nebulae seemed to swim slowly within it. Thorne raised the scraper, then froze. He looked at Donovan, then at us. Then, making a decision, he put the tool away and removed his thick glove with his bare hand. He reached for the surface. The moment his fingers touched the black ice, the hum cut off abruptly. A deafening silence fell. Thorne froze. His eyes widened, but he didn't scream. He just stared into nothing. His mouth was slightly open. 10, maybe 15 seconds passed. Then he snatched his hand back as it burned. "It's warm," Thorne whispered, his voice trembling. "It's alive." He took a few stumbling steps back. "What did you see?" Donovan asked sharply. Thorne shook his head. "I didn't see. I knew. It showed me structure. Not its own, but any structure. A cell, a crystal, a nervous system. It's all just information. It's an archive, a library of forms." He was speaking incoherently, struggling to find words for something for which no words existed. The hum slowly returned, but now it seemed different. It had new, more complex overtones. Donovan was clearly unsatisfied. He needed facts, samples, not metaphysical revelations. He ordered the engineers to set up a portable drilling rig. They dragged a small sled-mounted machine over, set it up, and pressed its diamond-tipped drill bit against the surface of the nearest crystal. When the engineer flipped the switch, the whine of the motor echoed in the chamber. but couldn't drown out the structure's low hum. The drill spun, pressed against the black surface, but nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. No dust, no scratches, not even the slightest indentation. After a minute, the drill bit glowed red hot and then simply melted, dripping onto the floor in puddles of useless metal. The engineer shut it down. Not a mark was left on the polyhedron surface. Now it was my turn. As a glaciologist, I had to give my assessment. I approached the structure. The fear was almost gone, replaced by an all-consuming curiosity. I, too, removed my glove. The air near the surface vibrated. I placed my palm against the smooth, warm facet. Unlike Thorne, I didn't receive a flood of information about biological forms. My consciousness was inundated with something else. Time. I felt the unimaginable geological antiquity of this place. I felt the continent forming, tectonic plates converging and diverging. Ice ages swept through my mind like the drawing of a breath. I felt the weight of millions of tons of ice above me, a pressure that had lasted for eons. And I understood this wasn't ice. This was something that had taken the form of ice, used it as a matrix, a building material, but was infinitely more complex and ancient. This structure was here before the first life appeared on the planet. It was waiting. I pulled my hand away, my head spinning. At that moment, the structure reacted, the hum intensified by several orders of magnitude, becoming almost painful. The geometric shapes began to move faster, reconfiguring with noticeable speed. And then the floor beneath our feet began to glow. Thin lines of light shot out from the base of the central column in all directions, forming an impossibly complex, constantly changing pattern. They spread out, intersected, forming something that resembled both a star chart and a circuit board the size of a city block. Dr. Reed, who had been sitting on the floor with her head in her hands, suddenly looked up. Her eyes were filled with horror and recognition. "It's a map," she breathed, "but not of space. It's a diagram of probabilities, pathways of cause and effect." The glowing lines on the floor continued to spread, approaching us. One of Donovan's men, a young Marine standing closest to the edge of the pattern, instinctively stepped back, but it was too late. One of the lines touched the toe of his boot. He didn't scream. He didn't fall. He just froze mid-step. His face was devoid of all expression. He wasn't breathing. Thorne, overcoming his fear, ran to him, grabbing his wrist, trying to find a pulse. "Nothing," he whispered, his face turning pale. "Complete cessation of all functions. He's not dead. He's switched off." Panic began to grip even Donovan's hardened Marines. They raised their weapons. But who was there to shoot? A glowing pattern on the floor? Geometry? Donovan yelled the order to retreat to the exit. But the patterns were already cutting off our path, spreading slowly but inexorably across the entire chamber. And then the hum changed again. It fractured into a series of distinct, pure tones, following one another in a specific sequence. It was a melody, but not a human one, mathematically precise and utterly alien. Dr. Reed scrambled to her feet. She looked at the spreading diagrams on the floor, listened to the sounds, and an expression more terrifying than panic crossed her face. Understanding. She looked at us with wild eyes and screamed, her voice cutting through the hum and the strange music. She wasn't screaming from fear. She was screaming from a horrifying epiphany. "It's not studying U.S., she shrieked. "It's not defending itself. It's calibrating U.S." And in that instant, the light on the floor went out. The melody stopped. The hum ceased. A total, absolute, unnatural silence fell. It was infinitely worse than any sound. We stood in the dark, lit only by the beams of our flashlights, in complete silence, in the center of something incomprehensible that had just finished its adjustments. November 18th, 1946. The silence lasted a minute, maybe two. In that absolute stillness, time lost all meaning. Every beat of my own heart in my ears seemed deafening. But outside of ourselves, there was nothing. We stood frozen. The beams of our flashlights darted around the chamber, snatching from the darkness the motionless body of Marine, Dr. Reed's frantic face, the impenetrable black surface of the central structure. It was silent. It no longer moved. It simply was. Donovan was the first to recover. He raised his radio to his face and keyed the microphone. "Polaris, come in." "Over." No response. Not even the hiss of static. The channel was dead, as if the radio's guts had been torn out. He tried again. Same result. "It cut us off," one of the engineers rasped. "It controls everything." "What do you mean, calibrating?" Donovan stepped toward Dr. Reed, grabbing her by the collar of her jumpsuit. "Talk." Reed let out a hysterical laugh, and the sound in the dead silence was especially gruesome. Isn't it obvious? It was measuring us, our vital signs, the structure of our tissues, the electrical activity in our brains, even the quantum fluctuations in our nerve cells. It was searching for a resonant frequency. It was finding the key to what makes us us. And it found it. At that moment, a sound came from the far, unlit part of the chamber. A scuffing sound, a boot on the smooth floor. One step, then another. The sound was perfectly clean, distinct. The kind of sound our own steps should have made if the acoustics of this place weren't dead. All our flashlights snapped in that direction. The beams cut to the darkness, but found nothing but the black, polished floor and walls stretching into infinity. And then a voice came from there. Dr. Thorne's voice. The density is incredible. Still can't even scratch it. It was the exact phrase Thorne had uttered an hour ago when he tried to take a sample. But Thorne was standing right next to me. His mouth was clamped shut, his face a mask of terror. "That wasn't me," he whispered. The nightmare had begun. Other voices rained down from the darkness. Our voices, fragments of conversations, scraps of phrases we had spoken since our landing. "Check the pressure on the tanks." The signal's getting swallowed. How much further? Donovan's voice giving an order. The engineer's voice, cursing the melted drill bit. My own voice, describing the feeling of ancient time. The sounds overlapped, creating a maddening cacophony of our own words, stripped of meaning and context. It was acoustic torture. It's not just repeating. Dr. Reed screamed again, trying to be heard over the chorus of our phantoms. It's reproducing. It's creating imprints, not just of sound, but of everything. The Marines started firing blindly into the darkness. The bullets vanished into the void. The sound of shots was as muffled and viscous as the first explosion outside. It brought no relief. Donovan yelled, "Cease fire," and the echo of his command immediately came back from the darkness, mocking him. His authority had evaporated. We were trapped with something that was playing with us, using ourselves as the material. One of the Marines, a corporal named Evans, suddenly screamed and clamped his hands over his ears. "Shut up! Get out of my head!" he yelled. A phantom voice, sounding exactly like his own, replied from the darkness, calm and clear. "Mom asked me not to go. She said this would end badly." Evans began to sob. It was his fear, his private memory, dragged out for all to see. He raised his rifle and opened fire into darkness, and the darkness answered. From the black floor, where the flashlight beams were aimed, a figure began to rise. It formed from the same material as everything else, taking on shape, color, and detail. In a few seconds, a perfect replica of Corporal Evans stood before us. It was dressed in the same uniform, held the same rifle, and wore the same expression of panicked terror on its face. The real Evans stopped firing, staring at his double. The copy didn't attack. It just started walking slowly toward him. Its movements were a perfect mirror image of Evans's own. The corporal took a step back, and the copy stepped forward. He raised his rifle, and the copy did the same. "What is that thing?" someone whispered next to me. The copy came right up to him. Evans screamed, a short, broken cry. The double didn't strike him. It simply stepped forward and merged with him. For one horrifying moment, their silhouettes overlapped, flickering and distorting like an image on a broken television screen. Then, Corporal Evans's body went limp and collapsed to the floor. The copy, however, froze for a moment, its face becoming completely blank, and then it simply melted, flowing back on the floor and becoming part of the black surface again. It all happened in seconds. We were frozen in horror. Now we understood. It wasn't just killing. It was erasing, replacing the original with a void. We understood it wasn't creating copies. It was creating a void in the shape of a person, and then filling that void with us. Donovan, his face gray in the flashlight beam, gave the last order that made any sense. To the exit. Run. We turned and bolted, running back toward the tunnel we had come from. And behind us, in the light of our receding flashlights, new figures began to rise from the floor. The figures of every single one of us. November 20th, 1946. This entry is fragmented. I'm riding on the run. We are running down an endless black corridor. It seems longer than when we came in. Maybe it is longer. Maybe this place stretches and contracts at will. Our heavy breaths, the thud of our boots, the clatter of our gear, the only sounds in this dead world. Behind us, there is silence. They aren't running. They are just walking. A steady, measured, relentless pace. We look back, and in the frantic beams of our flashlights, we see them. Our perfect copies. Dark silhouettes against the darkness, silent and purposeful. Their soundless pursuit is more terrifying than any scream. This isn't just a chase. It's psychological warfare. They began to speak, not in a chorus like in a chamber, but one by one. The voice of my double, calm and rational, came from the silence behind me. Samuel, think about it. Core samples from ice like this. We could read the planet's history for 1 billion years. It's the greatest discovery in history. It was striking at my deepest vulnerability, my scientific curiosity. I stumbled, but someone, I think it was Donovan, grabbed my arm and dragged me forward. Then the double of Dr. Reed spoke. It wasn't screaming like she had been, but spoke softly, persuasively. The calibration is complete. The vessel is ready for a consciousness transfer. No more limitations of the flesh. Evelyn, just pure knowledge. Isn't that what you've always wanted? We ran, and they carried on this monstrous dialogue with us. Donovan's double gave orders in its original's voice. Try and make the Marines stop. Squad, form a defensive line. I order you to engage. The 2 remaining Marines with us hesitated. Their true identities, their very essence forged by discipline, fought against the instinct for self-preservation. One of the communications engineers, running just ahead, slipped and fell. We ran past him. Donovan snarled, "Don't stop," and no one dared to disobey. I glanced over my shoulder. I saw the engineer's copy, without changing its pace, approach the fallen man. It didn't offer a hand. It simply bent down and covered him with its body like a shroud. A brief flash of distortion, and only one man was left lying on the floor. He was no longer moving. Another flashlight beam went out. The worst was Dr. Reed. She was running next to me, her face a mask of terror. Her double continued to tempt her, promising answers to all the questions that had tormented her entire life. We won't just show you the map of probabilities, Evelyn. We'll show you the equation that governs them, the code of the universe. It will be yours. And the physicist broke. She stopped dead, turning to face her pursuers. There was no more fear on her face. There was only a mad, hungry greed for knowledge. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I want to see." She took a step toward her double. The rest of us kept running. No one tried to stop her. We all understood she was already lost. I didn't see the merger itself, but I heard her insane, happy laughter cut off abruptly. We were getting close to the exit. The walls of the corridor were no longer static. They began to ripple like the surface of water. The black ice buckled. The geometry of the space was changing before our eyes. The passage narrowed, then widened again. New protrusions grew from the walls, forcing us to weave. This place didn't want to let us go. It was playing with us, turning our path to salvation into a labyrinth. There were only a few of us left. Me, Donovan, Dr. Thorne, and 2 Marines. Ahead, a light glimmered. Not a flashlight beam, but a different light. A dim, gray, real light. The light of the Antarctic day, filtering through the opening we had made an eternity ago. Hope hit me like a drug, giving us strength. We ran, no longer feeling our frostbitten feet or burning lungs. 50 yards. 40, 30. We could see the exit. The gray, Saving light. We were 20 yards away. We were running, shouting something incoherent. And then, right in front of us, a solid wall of black ice grew from the floor and walls of the passage, cutting us off from the world. It formed in a second, smooth, monolithic, without a single seam. The exit was gone. We slammed into it, beat it with our fists, but it was like hitting a mountain. And then I turned around. Our pursuers had stopped walking. They stood a few feet away from us. 5 figures, perfect copies of 5 of us. They didn't attack. They just stood in the dead silence of the corridor and waited. Date illegible. Presumed November 21st, 1946. We were trapped. 5 living people and 5 silent reflections. The silence was crushing, becoming physically palpable. My thoughts raced. This is the end. But what kind of end? What were they going to do? The answer came not through action, but through a quiet, gruesome theater. They began to move, not toward us, but simply living. The double of one of the Marines raised a hand and wiped its face, exactly like an old man wiping away a tear. Thorne's copy suddenly clutched its chest, its face contorting in a silent grimace of pain, mimicking the heart attack he might have had 30 years from now. Donovan's double just stood at attention, staring into the void, a monument to the long, empty retirement he would never have. My double, it raised a hand and began to write something with an invisible finger in the air. It was portraying me as an old man, obsessed for the rest of my life, trying to describe what I saw here. They weren't threatening us with death. They were showing us the lives they had stolen from us. This broke the Marines. They were ready for a fight, for death in battle, but not for this passive, existential horror. One of them screamed an incoherent curse and charged his copy with a knife. The merger was instant. The Marine vanished. His scream was cut off mid-word. His double dissolved. The second Marine, seeing this, did the same. Maybe it was rebellion. Maybe it was despair. He, too, disappeared. 3 of us remained, myself, Donovan, and Thorne. And our 3 copies, which had ceased their performance and were once again watching us in silence. The air grew thick. Donovan slowly lowered his gaze to his belt. Through this whole panic chase, he hadn't used his last resort, a grenade. He knew it wouldn't damage the structure, wouldn't breach the wall, but it was his last order, the last decision he could make for himself. He looked at me, then at Thorne. In his empty eyes, for the first time, I saw something other than duty. Maybe it was resignation. They don't get to decide how we end, he said quietly. His voice was neither heroic nor desperate, just a statement of fact. He didn't throw the grenade. He pulled the pin and held it to his chest. Thorne stood next to him. He understood. He didn't step away. He just closed his eyes. I was standing several feet away and instinctively covered my face with my hands. The explosion was a pathetic pop, immediately swallowed by the silence of this place. A brief flash blinded me, and the shock wave threw me against the wall. I hit my head and lost consciousness for a few seconds. When my vision returned, it was over. The acrid smell of cordite hung in the air. Donovan and Thorne, there was almost nothing left of them. Their copies were also gone. Maybe because the originals ceased to exist according to their rules. Maybe their mission was accomplished. I was alone, alive and wounded. I tried to stand, but a sharp pain in my leg and a wave of dizziness stopped me. And then I saw it, my copy. It was the only one left. It stood a few feet away, looking at me with its empty eyes. It didn't approach. It didn't try to merge with me. It just watched. Then it did something I could not have foreseen. It turned away from me and walked to the wall that had blocked our exit. It touched it with its palm. The black surface rippled, and slowly, as if being squeezed from within, a small object emerged from the wall. Rectangular, dark. My notebook, the very one in which I've been writing these entries. It must have fallen from my pocket during the explosion. The copy took it. It opened it to the last page. Then it knelt on the floor beside me. It looked at me, then at the empty lines, and began to write. The last entry in the journal is written in the same hand as all the previous ones. The ink is fresh. The explosion stunned me. Donovan and Thorne are dead. Their copies are gone. Mine remains. It stands over me and does not touch me. The wall blocking the exit is still there. I am wounded. I will not get out. But I must finish the record. I must tell the world what happened here. What happened here?